Center for the Ethiopian Educational Information and Communication Technology presents Educational Satellite Television Programs.
Hello, teacher. Hello, students. Welcome to today's lesson on arts and literature. Previously, we discussed the use of social expressions that change or come back to the subject. We studied a few different situations where these expressions can be used appropriately. We also defined how important it is to use these expressions in order to have a clear conversation about several topics. Today, we will focus on expanding our vocabulary. In English, many terms that we use to describe a job are designed to describe the job in general. Oftentimes, though, there are ways to be more specific about the job if we have the vocabulary to do so. In this lesson, we will discuss writers. Many different kinds of writers work in the arts and media. Let us learn more about this together. The basic definition of a writer is someone who writes a particular text. However, depending on the text, we may be able to be even more specific about what a writer does. For instance, a writer can also be a journalist. A journalist is someone who writes for newspapers or magazines or prepares news to be broadcast on radio or television. A writer may also be a novelist. A novelist is a writer who produces novels, which are book-length works of fiction. However, there are many more types than just these two examples. Get ready for an activity, students. You will be presented with a list of occupations. Working with a partner, do your best to define at least 3 of them. You may begin.
Students, let's get ready. Begin. Time's up! Let's get back to our lesson.
Welcome back, everyone. Were you able to define each occupation correctly? Let us go through them together. An editor is a person who is in charge of and determines the final content of a text, particularly a newspaper or magazine. Usually, this involves replacing words or phrases in an already completed text to make it clearer. If you look over something you have just written and remove a sentence you do not need, you are editing your work. A reviewer or critic is a person who judges the merits of literary, artistic, or musical works. A critic's writing usually appears in the form of an article, which can generally be found in magazines and newspapers. A screenwriter is a person who writes the script for a film, including the acting instructions and scene directions. The script is called a screenplay. A playwright is someone who writes plays for theatrical performances. Both the playwright and the screenwriter produce scripts. The difference is the medium in which the script is presented. A playwright works specifically on live theater, whereas a screenwriter works specifically on pre-recorded films. A poet is someone who writes poems. A poem is a literary work that incorporates elements of both speech and song, and that is nearly always rhythmical and metaphorical. Usually, the structure of a poem is very formally structured. Finally, an author is someone who writes books as a profession. These could be works of fiction or non-fiction. Were you able to define any of these jobs? If so, excellent work. It is worth noting that all the people in these professions are also writers. In fact, if we were addressing several writers with different occupations, it would be more appropriate to refer to them by the more general term, writers. This is because each of their occupations are representative of different genres of writing. Consider our earlier lesson when we discussed the genre of Casino Royale. Casino Royale is a film, but its genre is action-adventure. A musician could also be a singer or a guitarist. Let us do an activity. See what words you know that can be used to be more specific about a particular profession. You will be provided with 3 jobs. Working with a partner, try to list 3 occupations that represent each. Do your best, students.
Students, let's get ready. Begin. Time's up! Let's get back to our lesson.
Welcome back, everyone. Let us take a look at each job and see what we can learn. Construction workers are people who build and maintain public works. However, there are many occupations within this field. For instance, a construction worker might be a plumber whose specialty is to install and repair pipes and fittings for water supplies and sanitation systems. A construction worker might also be an electrician who specializes in the installation of electrical equipment. The construction worker might even be an architect who designs buildings and supervises their construction. Artists broadly describe a wide range of potential occupations. An artist is defined as a person who practices any of the creative arts. This means an artist can also be a sculptor. A sculptor is someone who carves art into bodies of stone and wood, or casts metal and plaster into different forms. An artist could also be a painter, meaning they produce their art using a canvas and paintbrush. An artist could even be an actor who commits their attention to creating a believable, dramatic performance for their audience. A doctor is a term for someone who practices medicine. Since there are many different fields of study, there are several occupations to choose from to describe a doctor more accurately. A doctor might be a pediatrician, who is a doctor who specializes in the branch of medicine that deals with children and their diseases. A doctor could also be a neurologist. A neurologist is a doctor who specializes in the branch of medicine that deals with anatomy and the organic disorders of nerves and the nervous system. A doctor may also be a surgeon. A surgeon is a doctor that is qualified to practice surgery. As you can see, students, there are many ways in which we can be clearer when describing jobs in English. After the lesson is over, as a class, discuss some of the other words you came up with during the last activity. As you listen, write down the words you do not understand in your vocabulary notebook. This concludes today's lesson. We have learned some new words to help expand our vocabularies when it comes to describing a person's job. Until next time, thank you, teacher. Thank you, students.